Hello, and welcome to Title Talk and Real Estate in New York. I'm Brenda Posner from Langdon Title. Today we have Adam Stone joining us, a New York real estate lawyer who's going to be discussing purchasers' closing costs, what you would encounter as a purchaser. So Adam, tell us a little about yourself.
Sure. My name is Adam Stone. I am an attorney here in New York City. I've practiced primarily in real estate transactions for the New York City and surrounding areas. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I'm happy to share my knowledge with you.
Okay, so let's see. I guess when a buyer is starting out to look, they want to know how much money do they need to be able to, in addition to the purchase price, to be able to afford a home?
Yes, this is something that purchasers should think about as early in the process as possible. And my answer is going to be, it depends. I know that's not very helpful, but it depends on what type of property. There are closing costs that are very different, whether you're purchasing a co-op or a condo, and whether you are getting financing or not. The reason being, New York State has what we call a mortgage recording tax, and this applies for a purchase of a condo or a house, but does not apply to a co-op apartment purchase, okay? So the general rule of thumb is, I'd say 2% of the mortgage amount would be the mortgage recording tax charge for a purchaser in New York City. So you can tell there, if you're buying a $1.5 million apartment, and you're getting $1 million mortgage, that's a $20,000 closing cost right there. So the mortgage recording tax may be the biggest or the largest closing cost for a purchaser. Another large one is what we call the New York State mansion tax. And this is a transfer tax that purchasers pay if their purchase price is $1 million or higher. Starting at $1 million, the mansion tax is 1% of the purchase price. And depending on how high that purchase price goes, the tax rate goes up to 3.9% in different increments. And I think best is to consult with me or your agent or with somebody who knows the different price levels and the different percentages. But 1% mansion tax for $1 million. When it gets to 2 million, it starts changing. It starts going up again. So back to the question of, well, how much money do I need? It's really going to be dependent upon the type of property and the amount of the mortgage, but I can get involved early and run actual numbers for a purchaser or the purchaser's agent and help them understand what type of funds they need in order to get this closing done.
So even if somebody is buying a one-bedroom apartment, they still have to pay mansion tax?
Yes, I get asked this question frequently. They say, well, wait a minute, I'm only buying a one-bedroom. Why am I paying a mansion tax? The name, I guess, really is antiquated and unfortunate, and it should be changed. But the level of when this transfer tax kicks in is at the $1 million price point. So it doesn't matter what type of property it is. Most likely you're not getting a mansion in New York City, but that mansion tax kicks in. And remember, this is a New York State mansion tax. So for $1 million, maybe somewhere upstate or out west, you are getting a mansion, or at least you were decades ago when this tax first came into place. But yes, they should change the name. They're not going to do away with the tax.
So do buyers' closing costs change dramatically based on the type of property people are purchasing?
Yes, they do, because as mentioned, if you're purchasing a co-op, you do not have to pay that mortgage recording tax. You do still have to pay a mansion tax depending on your price point, but you do not pay that almost 2% mortgage recording tax of the amount of your mortgage. With the co-op apartment, there may be other closing costs that come into play depending on the building. Some co-op buildings have what we call a flip tax or transfer fee. Most buildings that have this type of flip tax impose it on the seller, but there are some that impose it on the purchaser. So it's always important to look into this as part of our due diligence review, or just when discussing making an offer on a property. And then when we have all the relevant information, we can help come up with the transfer taxes, flip taxes, general closing costs needed to close this transaction.
Now, what happens if the sales price changes?
So most of these closing costs are dependent on the sales price and the mortgage amount. So if either of those change, the closing costs will change. Generally, the sales price goes up, the mortgage amount goes up too, so the closing costs all go up. If that's not the case, if there's no mortgage, then there are different factors to take into consideration. If the purchase price comes down, I can explain easily what that means for closing costs. But really, it always depends on the price point and how much variation there is going to be in the sales price and mortgage amount.
Okay. Is there an easy way to get a general estimate of what closing costs could be for a buyer for each type of property potentially?
I wish it was easy, and I'll explain why it's not that easy. And by doing so, I'm going to add in another closing cost that we haven't hit on yet, and that's title insurance policies. When you're purchasing a condo or a house, but not a co-op, you also have to purchase title insurance. And the title insurance policies are governed. The rates are dictated by New York State, as you know, and that is based solely on the sales price and the mortgage amount. So it doesn't matter. You can go to any title insurance company in New York State. The rates will be the same. It will all depend on the sales price and the mortgage amount. So there really is no magic formula to figure out, say, well, if a purchaser should expect 5% of the purchase price to be in closing costs. I wish it was that easy. I don't trust sometimes when other people come up with those percentages. I like to run the numbers myself, and it's really not that hard for me to do. So that's why I think it's important to get in touch with me or somebody like me early on in the process.
Okay. Now, is there a way to reduce or eliminate some of the closing costs?
There are possible ways to do that, yes. I should mention, I suppose, that everything is negotiable, so to speak, meaning is it possible to get a seller to pay some of the closing costs that you would normally get? Well, that's going to depend on the market and what the terms of your offer are. But one specific way that it's possible to reduce a closing cost is if a purchaser does have this mortgage recording tax. If the purchase is for a condo apartment, for example, you're going to have this almost 2% mortgage recording tax. It's possible to do something that's called a purchase CEMA. That's CEMA. It stands for Consolidation, Extension, Modification Agreement. And there is a way to eliminate some or possibly all of that mortgage recording tax, depending if the seller already has a mortgage on the property and what the balance of on principal of that seller's mortgage is. We can sort of try to make the purchaser's mortgage tax disappear or at least be greatly reduced. And I'm happy to talk about that in more detail with anybody who has questions on that. But that's something to bring up again early in the process. Once you have identified a property, we can look in to see whether the seller does in fact have a mortgage or not, if this is even a possibility for your particular transaction.
So Adam, again, if for any buyers or realtors that might be listening, what is the best time that people should contact you?
I think it's always best to get in touch with their team. It's their agent, their mortgage professional, and their attorney right when they're starting the process. Maybe when they first go out looking for properties, maybe when they're just thinking about what it is they can afford. Because based on some estimates, I can run numbers very easily and show by example how much money a purchaser would need to close depending on which type of property it is they're looking to purchase, what the price point is, and what the mortgage amount is. So as early as possible, I guess is the short answer.
Okay, that's great to know. A lot of great information here. Thank you so much, Adam, for joining us today.